podcast.
Welcome to Our Weird World. I'm your host, John Henson, and you will be thrilled to know that I have exercised some restraint and some clear thinking in that I just, this is take number 2 of this intro. I just spent the last 10 minutes on this weird rambling monologue about how millennials suck. Even though I'm a millennial, and how everybody's got this victim mentality, and how everywhere sucks, and that, like, you know, America, pretty great, not the greatest, but guess what? It's not that great anywhere else either. And whose fault is that? All of ours, because we all suck in general. All right, there are more people in the world who want to do evil, selfish, greedy things than there are people who want to be nice and selfless and loving. And that was the whole point. And then I just kept going and I wouldn't shut up about it. And I started looking, I'm like, wow, we got a really big episode. All right. We got 3 pretty big stories. I don't want this to be an hour-long episode with a quarter of it being me complaining about just random pockets of people that won't ever listen to this and do anything about it, because it's easier to just complain and listen to other people complain about things than to actually do something about those things that people are complaining about. Anyway, all of that being said, I deleted all of that for like one of the rare times. I have re-recorded things in the past, but it was usually out of either technical error or the entire episode was trash. So here we are with serial killer sampler number 8, right? We are looking at 3 more serial killers from history today. We are looking at Robert Black, Larry Eyler, and our first story will be of David Mason.
Story time. Story time. Story time? Story time.
David Mason was born on December 2nd, 1956 in Statesboro, Georgia, home of Georgia Southern University. No, you don't care about that, but, there you go. About 55 miles west of Savannah. Because Mason's parents already had 3 children, they weren't exactly thrilled about having any more. And so his mother tried to induce a miscarriage by just constantly lifting heavy furniture and aggressively riding horses, which is such a passive aggressive way to have a miscarriage, and also just like rude. I don't know what it's like to be a woman, obviously, but like I know that there are so many women out there who struggle to get pregnant, and then you have women like Miss Mason here who just can't stop getting pregnant, and she doesn't want to be pregnant. And so she's like, I gotta get this. And so like, granted, to her credit, she didn't like yeet herself down a flight of stairs or do something a little more aggressive. She was just like kind of doing things that doctors recommend you don't do. She's probably eating a lot of Subway at this point, even though it's in the 1950s and I don't think Subway existed yet, but probably a lot of processed deli meats, probably smoking a lot, probably drinking a lot, maybe. Anyway, it didn't work. David Mason was born, and the Masons went on to have 4 more children after that. So that's what you get. The family then soon moved to Oakland, California, where the children were physically and verbally abused if they didn't show the utmost enthusiasm for their church activities, which that's never, all right? I'm not going to lie to you. I grew up in church, hated every second of it. And not, the reasons now are very different than the reasons why when I was a kid. I hated it as a kid because, one, I hated waking up early on a Sunday. That was lame, all right? I hated going to Sunday school, being around these weird kids that I didn't know, nor did I like, and then sitting in a room with this woman, this smelly, with every Sunday school woman, teacher, smells weird. All right? They smell weird. But like everybody's got peppermints. So like it's kind of okay. You at least get to have a peppermint in your little Sunday school class, and then you're just sitting there listening to some kind of Bible story, whatever, blah, 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 blah. And then you go to the main service, which is just all these people. Just droning through the hymns, and then the preacher gets up there. Everything's all like, brr, 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 brr. I realize it's different now. Like churches have like fog machines and pyro, and everybody just this overly enthusiastic worship. Be like, hey, everybody, welcome to church. Yeah, we're going to praise Jesus today. Hallelujah. Yeah, clap your hands. Okay, we're going to put the lyrics up on a projector because no one knows these songs. Here we go. And everything, the worship bands go in, and the crowd's just kind of standing there awkwardly, kind of clapping like, oh, man. They're still mumbling the lyrics because no one wants to sing that early in the morning. Anyway, that's my latest take on church. Mason himself, we're back into the story. Mason, he hated church so much and being abused for hating church so much that he tried to commit suicide at age 5 by swallowing as many pills as he could find, but it didn't work, probably because he couldn't find very many. 3 years later, his father found him standing in front of his younger brother's crib holding a knife, for which he received a massive beating, as he should. Like, I can't condone that behavior. Mason's behavior soon got so out of control that his parents locked him in his room for hours at a time, even going so far as to install steel bars over his windows so he couldn't, like, climb out through the window and leave the house. On one occasion, when Mason pooped his pants because he couldn't get out of his own room to go to the bathroom, his mother then made him wear his soiled underwear on his head. So, listen, I'm not saying murder is justified. In some cases it is. This one's kind of on the line. Like, I kind of get it. I kind of get why he became who he would later become. I don't condone all of the people that he murdered, but if he had murdered his family, like, I would have been like, nah, all right. I get it. Over the next few years, Mason made additional attempts to kill himself through various methods, such as hanging himself, throwing himself downstairs, cutting his veins, and even lighting himself on fire. When none of those things worked, which is crazy that none of those worked, he then took out his frustrations by bullying other kids, setting fire to the neighbors' houses and his school and his church. After being arrested in 1970, he reported his parents' abusive behavior to police, who then ordered him to undergo a psychiatric evaluation. After showing an IQ of 110 and signs of PTSD, he was then sent to a boarding school. Now, what happens at boarding schools? Well, Mason was sexually abused by the staff and other kids at the school, which forced him to escape on multiple occasions. Now, here's where I think David Mason went wrong. All right. He gets out of his abusive home. Great. Good job, buddy. You did it. He goes to this boarding school, and he's immediately now abused by the teachers and the staff. That's a bummer. I feel bad for you. You escape. Great job, buddy. You're doing it again. Go anywhere. You are free, my man. And what does he do? He goes back home. You're an idiot. And now I don't feel sorry for him anymore because you make bad decisions and you're bad at killing yourself. It's amazing how, and I've said this before, it's amazing how good serial killers are at killing people and yet so bad at killing themselves. You only got to go 1 for 1 on killing yourself. And yet these dudes go like 0 for 5, 7, 10 it's crazy. Anyway, so he goes back home after escaping boarding school. Well, guess what? His parents don't want him. And so they send him right back to the boarding school. In 1973, he was arrested for arson and spent several months in a juvenile detention center. And then in 1974, he dropped out of school prior to the end of his junior year and enlisted in the Marine Corps. He was dismissed 4 months later. All of this happening before this dude turns 18, which is crazy. After returning home from being dismissed from the Marines, he went back home like an idiot. Mason supported himself through prostitution and any other small job that he could take. On July 8th, 1977, he stabbed Virginia Jansen with an ice pick after robbing the store she worked at in San Leandro. Despite promising to kill her if she called police, Jansen still went to the police and identified him as her attacker, so good job. At this point, should put him away for a while. He's clearly got issues, all right? Police understand his rap sheet at this point. Instead, he was given a 3-year prison sentence, but was paroled after 2 years. 8 months after his release, Mason really decided to just go full board, start killing people. It began on March 6, 1980, when he visited 73-year-old Joan Picard, who had previously hired him to clean and garden around her house. After threatening her, he demanded that she hand over her coin collection and all the other money she had on hand. Picard instead tried to trip her security alarm, but that just pissed Mason off, so he choked her unconscious and looted the house. Several minutes later, Picard regains consciousness. This old lady, right? She's 73 years old. She's been choked out, unconscious. She regains consciousness, tries to run away, which 73, you're not running, all right? You're waddling, hobbling, whatever. Mason, he is peak athleticism age right now. He chases her down, beats her, strangles her to death with an electric wire. He then sold her entire coin collection for $85. Hardly seems worth it, all right? I've got a coin collection. Pretty proud of it. I don't know how much it's worth. Probably around that amount. You know, if we're being serious. I don't know that I have very many rare coins or whatever. It's just random coins from different countries. And I like that. I think it's cool. Anyway, it's beside the point. On August 18th, Mason then visited 83-year-old Arthur Jennings, known throughout the area for paying teenage boys for sexual favors. Gross. Mason later claimed that the two had sex with each other on several occasions while he was in high school. Ew. Just a teenage boy having sex with like some late 70s man. How does that? I can't imagine my wiener still working at that age. Like, how does, what? And then maybe it's the old man doing some things or, letting the kid get all up in them guts. I don't know, but gross. Either way, gross. Ew. Anyway, we're going to move on. He ultimately strangled Jennings, Mason did, and stole $16. So he's not great at getting a lot of money for these things. On November 16th, Mason broke into 75-year-old Antoinette Brown's apartment where he beat and strangled her with a knot that he had made from her underwear and other clothing. And then on December 6th, he broke into 72-year-old Dorothy Lang's apartment and beat her to death. A month later, on January 6th, we're in 1981 now, Mason sped past a patrol car on Interstate 580 in Alameda County, California, out still near the Oakland area. During this high-speed chase, Mason entered a residential area and cornered himself on a dead-end street. Although he escaped on foot because it's California police. They suck at everything. Police were able to search his car and found a receipt from a repair shop that contained his parents' home address. 2 weeks later, I don't know why it took him 2 weeks to go to this address. You could literally just drive there right now. Police visited the home and were told that Mason had left a week earlier without warning. So they literally could have gone to the house the next day and gotten him. Instead, they wait 2 weeks for some reason, and now he's gone. However, Mason had given his parents a cassette tape labeled David E. Mason Epitaph with instructions to play it if something happened to him. So police played the cassette, which contained Mason confessing to an absurdly long list of crimes, violent crimes, including details about his murders that hadn't been solved yet that only the police knew about. He ended the tape by explaining that he thought he would die in a shootout with police. Instead, he was arrested without incident a month later on February 4th. During his interrogation, he confessed to an additional murder not mentioned on the tape, that of 55-year-old Robert Groff, who had paid Mason for sex. According to Mason, Groff told him that he had intentionally infected Mason with herpes, which then resulted in Mason going to Groff's trailer and shooting him while he slept, which that's justified. If true, totally justified. I get that one. They shouldn't even charge him with murder on that one. I totally get that one. While Mason sat in the Alameda County Jail to await trial, he learned of another inmate named Boyd Johnson who had been arrested for rape and murder. Johnson had actually been demanded to be put in solitary confinement, which led other inmates to believe that he wasn't actually a murderer and a rapist, but an informant to try to get somebody to confess to something else. So Mason quickly convinced 3 other inmates that Johnson then needed to be murdered. And later that night, Mason sent Quentin Shorter into Johnson's cell to attack him. After a quick struggle, Johnson was then beaten and strangled with a towel. After this murder, after he's dead, Mason and Shorter carried Johnson's body to the shower room and hanged him from a water pipe in an attempt to make it look like a suicide. But not only is Mason bad at trying to kill himself, he's also bad at making it look like other people killed himself, because Shorter just goes and confesses to prison authorities, and who later then found bloodstains on Mason's belongings that match Johnson's DNA. Despite providing seemingly solid alibis for 2 of the murders, he was found guilty of all 5 murder charges that I had mentioned and was given the death penalty. Despite receiving over 200 letters from dingalings who wanted him to appeal his death sentence, and despite the prison system installing a telephone in the gas chamber for him to halt the execution and file an appeal, which is so stupid, Mason refused. Finally, one good decision in his life. And he was executed on August 24th, 1993. I mean, look, even if he had a solid alibi and didn't actually commit 2 of the 5 murders that he did, all right, he still definitely killed 3 people and burned down he's a pyromaniac, all right? Fire. He had a big problem with fire. And just between those 2 things, kill him. He deserves to die. Like, just so ridiculous that these social justice warriors out there be like, no, death penalty's wrong. You should appeal. Oh, no. Like, if it's one guy committed of one murder that's kind of still up in the air, sure, I get it completely. Maybe don't use the death penalty on that person. But like people who've committed multiple murders and are clearly insane and broken, kill them. Let them just... If we get a second chance, let him take that second chance now. But, and by second chance, I mean like reincarnation or whatever. Anyway, you get it. No, you don't, because I had to explain it. Our next story here is of Robert Black. This is going to be a great episode. He was born on April 21st, 1947 in Grangemouth, Scotland. His mother, ashamed of being pregnant out of wedlock, immediately put Robert up for adoption and ran off to Australia, where no one cares about anything over there. Unfortunately, Robert was never adopted and was sent to the Tulips. The Tulip family was a foster couple in Kinlochleven, Scotland. Anyway, I just got to say it like that. As a child, Robert cared very little about hygiene and became known as Smelly Bobby Tulip. When he was 5, he and a girl his age compared their naughty bits together, because that's what kids do. You know, it's like, hey, I got a little winky that sticks out. Let me see your winky. And then the girl was like, okay, I'll show you my winky. It doesn't stick out like that. It kind of goes inside. I don't know what that's all about. Am I different than you? Why are you different than me? That's crazy. Anyway, and so when Robert, he saw that she had an innie and he had an outie, and he then believed that that's how he was supposed to be. He thought he was supposed to look like that. Because apparently he'd never seen another wiener before, which isn't the worst thing, but maybe you got to have some conversations with some kids. I don't know. I don't know. I don't know how to do that with a kid. That's gonna be a weird time when Finn comes in like, Dad, what's this for? Like, he's already grabbing at it in the bathtub. He noticed it. He didn't like it was there, and he thought that it needed to come off. And it's like, dude, whoa, hey, don't do that. That's going to be bad for you. But then he's going to start talking about it. So, Dad, what is this thing right here. And why does it hurt when I pull on it? And it's like, yeah, man, that's just the thing you got to deal with. All right. Just don't punch people there. Don't get punched there. And you'll be all right. And that's probably going to be the extent of my conversation. Don't go sticking it in things for sure. Will also be part of that conversation. Don't be sticking it in things or people or animals. We're just going to make sure we cover all our bases here. Maybe that'll give him some ideas. I hope not. Maybe he'll just listen to me, because I'm going to try to have a good relationship with my kid like that, where it's like, I tell him not to do something. He's probably going to be like, all right, trust this guy's judgment. Anyway, this went to a really weird place. So Robert, he sees this girl. She's got an innie. He's got an outie. He thinks he should have an innie, and he believes that he should have been born a girl instead. From then on, Robert developed this intense fascination with just genitals in period. In period? That's not how you say that. I don't know what I was trying to say there. Anyway, you understand what I'm saying. You get it. Like, he just developed a fascination with wieners and vagines, right? He's just obsessed with them. Like, how do they work? And so he was particularly interested in his butthole, which often became the home for whatever he decided to just cram up in there just for funsies. And if that wasn't enough, because this is a really weird story, Robert was the target of the school bullies and eventually became a bully himself. He was a chronic bedwetter, and his foster mother beat him every time he had an accident, which was often. People around town often saw Robert sporting various bruises on his face and limbs, but because Robert was in so many fights with other kids and his foster parents, he could never remember how he'd gotten any particular bruise. By 1958, his foster parents had died, leaving him with another family in Kinlochleven. When he dragged a young girl into a bathroom and fondled her, his new foster mother reported him to police and had him removed from the home. Following a brief stay at a mixed-sex children's home in Falkirk, which, it's why are you doing that? Because he continued fondling girls. Robert was then sent to an all-boys home in Musselburgh with all of the buttholes he could ever want. Even though girls have buttholes too, but he was more interested in other stuff over there. Unsurprisingly, he was molested by male staff members for the next 3 years. In 1963, Robert came across a 7-year-old girl playing by herself in a park. He promised to show her some kittens, but instead lured her into an abandoned air raid shelter, choked her unconscious, and just kind of, burped the worm all over her body, if you know what I'm saying. Although he was arrested the next day, a psychiatrist suggested that it was a one-time thing, probably wouldn't happen again. He's fine. Well, guess what? It didn't happen again. The end. On to our next story. No, of course not. So Robert ended up going back to Grangemouth and began dating a nice young lady who clearly had no other viable options in life. She's probably just happy that someone was just intensely fascinated with, her plumbing down there. When Robert asked her to marry him, though, she broke up with him instead, citing his unusual sexual demands as the primary reason she couldn't possibly spend the rest of her life with him. So maybe she wasn't like super into the fact that he's just like really just down there all the time, just inspecting it. It was like, hey, can I stick my nose in there? I just want to smell it. Just get up in there. It's a nice smell, can I stick some pretzels? Can I just take some of those pretzel sticks? Those big ones, those big pretzel rods, just stick those in there. And then can I just pull them out and suck on those? The saltiness with the whatever. I'm sorry. That just got so unnecessarily graphic. I am so sorry. Oh, man. Anyway, Robert then, so he's heartbroken. His one girlfriend rejected his wedding proposal, and so he goes out and molests his landlord's 9-year-old daughter. In 1968, following a 6-month stay at a detention center in Brighton's, Robert moved down to London. He got work as a lifeguard, but was quickly fired after it was discovered he had fondled another girl. He also, at this point, began collecting child pornography and spent his time discreetly taking pictures of young girls at local swimming pools. Which is great. I don't know how you discreetly take pictures in 1968. There was no camera small enough to do that. whatever. In 1976, Robert got a job as a long-distance truck driver for a poster company. The new career gave him detailed knowledge of the UK's road system, which allowed him to start kidnapping kids and depositing them hundreds of miles away after he had killed them. He also began altering his appearance on a regular basis and began wearing various pairs of glasses to match a corresponding hairstyle. Obviously, just kidnapping girls, fondling them, or taking pictures of them wasn't enough. And so on August 12th, 1981, 9-year-old Jennifer Carty was abducted less than a mile from her home. Her body then was found 6 days later in a reservoir. 2 years later, in 1983, 11-year-old Susan Maxwell was found dead 264 miles from where she was last seen. Around the same time, 5-year-old Caroline Hogg had been found 310 miles from where she had disappeared. Although police felt pretty confident that a long-distance driver had actually been responsible for both murders, there was just no way of stopping every single truck driver to question them and figure out who had done it. So, the investigation was initially logged in a card filing system containing over 500,000 index cards of information, which is obviously extremely inefficient. So, police began the process of digitizing that information, spending £250,000 implementing the new Holmes information system. Within months, the database contained 60,000 interviews and had information on over 189,000 people and 220,000 vehicles, which is still so much information. Also, because everyone was so busy filing the information into this new system, Robert was just out there continuing to molest little girls. On April 19th, 1986, 10-year-old Sarah Harper was found gagged and partially naked floating down the River Trent, 71 miles from where she had last been seen. This time, however, a witness called police saying Harper was last seen with a stocky, balding man. So, now police have kind of a description to start weeding some of these people out with. So, with a more focused area to search, 7 different police forces, including the FBI for some reason, worked together to find Robert. Using the psychological profile created by the FBI, investigators narrowed their list of suspects into the Holmes database to only those convicted of serious sexual offenses against children. Shockingly, that list was 40,000 names long. Even more shocking, Roberts was not on it somehow. Even though he has already served time in detention centers and has been arrested multiple times for molesting girls and kids and stuff. On April 23rd, 1988, Robert pretended that his van had broken down near a park. And as Teresa Thornhill walked by, Robert asked if she knew how to fix engines, because obviously a small child would be able to do that. When Teresa said no and tried to walk away, Robert grabbed her and tried to drag her into the van. There was just a problem with that. Teresa was actually much older than Robert thought. She was only 4'11" at the time, so Robert thought that she was younger, probably like 10 or 11, which 4'11" is still pretty tall for a kid. In reality, she was 15 years old, which is a problem that has fooled many a man over the course of history. It's just getting those ages wrong. After the two wrestled for control, Teresa actually grabbed Robert's balls and squeezed as hard as she could, which then forced Robert to let her go. Even more, Teresa's boyfriend had now arrived on the scene, shouting, "Let go of her, you fat bastard," which is a direct quote. Panicked, Robert let Teresa fall into the street before speeding off. On July 14th, 1990, Robert abducted a 6-year-old girl. However, the entire incident was witnessed by 53-year-old David Herkis, who was mowing his lawn at the time and noted the van's license plate number as it sped away. 6 minutes later, all of 6 minutes, which is great. It's very efficient police work here. Police arrived just in time to see Robert inexplicably driving back into the neighborhood. Why would you do that? An officer quickly ran out into the road, forced the van to a stop, and arrested him. With everyone safe, police searched the van and found ropes, plaster, hoods, a Polaroid camera, numerous articles of young girls' clothing, and an assortment of sex toys. Gross. Robert explained that he would just stop at rest areas on his delivery routes, dress in the clothes, and do a little Lone Rangering, which is just a weird, that's officer. No, I'm not molesting little girls. You got it all wrong. I've got a lot of delivery routes. Sometimes I just like to take a break, like to dress up, pretend I'm someone else, pretend that I'm like this real pretty lady. And I just like to kind of do it with myself. I'm not. You got to believe me, officer. Come on. I'm not. No. I'm not that. I'm not. No. Anyway, you get it. Police obviously didn't buy that. They searched his apartment, which revealed a ton of child pornography and a semen-stained copy of a Nottingham newspaper that had covered the story of his failed abduction of Teresa Thornhill. Like, how messed up are you mentally? Where you're going to go home, okay, you're going to read a story about how you failed to abduct a girl, and that turns you on so much that you just make a bald man puke all over that copy of a newspaper. And I just, oh God, this guy. Anyway, the following month, Robert was given a life sentence for the final abduction, of that 6-year-old girl that he was eventually caught for. In later interviews with investigators still looking into the murders of Caroline Hogg and Susan Maxwell that I mentioned previously, Robert admitted to sexually assaulting more than 30 girls in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. Investigators quickly felt really confident that Robert was responsible for various murders and then sent him to trial. He was ultimately convicted of 4 murders, though detectives believe that he killed at least 8 people, and was given a life sentence. He would not be considered for parole until he was at least 89 years old, but he would not make it that far. In 1995, Robert was attacked in his cell by 2 inmates who threw a mixture of boiling water and sugar on him. I don't know what the sugar's for. They then beat him with a table leg and stabbed him in the back and neck with a shiv. That actually didn't kill him. He actually died of a heart attack on January 12th, 2016. Our final story here is of Larry Eyler, who was born on December 21st, 1952 in Crawfordsville, Indiana. His father, unsurprisingly as it may be in this series, was an alcoholic who frequently abused his 4 kids and his wife. After abandoning the family when Eyler was just 2 years old, Eyler's mother placed her kids in foster care while she worked 3 jobs just to get all the bills paid. Eyler then bounced around various boys' homes with regular visits to psychiatrists who noted his extreme insecurity and separation anxiety. By the time he was a teenager, Eyler discovered that he was gay and really hated himself for it, probably because he lived in Indiana, which has always been just a not friendly place to the LGBT community. By the time he graduated with his GED, Eyler's mother had married 4 other times, each to increasingly more alcoholic men. Like, babe, what are you doing? Like the first one, okay, fine. Everyone makes mistakes. All right. The second guy also being an alcoholic. Okay, fine. Third guy is an even worse alcoholic. What are you doing? Stop picking him like that. All right. And then the 4th guy, I don't have any, I don't have any sympathy at that point. After getting his diploma, Eyler worked various jobs and explored Indianapolis's gay community. Although he found several willing partners, he never actually made eye contact with them while they were doing it. So during the gay sexes, imagine 2 dudes doing it and they would be face to face, which I guess is how it can be done. But Eyler would have his eyes closed and then call his partners whores, leading many of his partners to think that he was actually trying to fantasize that they were women. By the mid-'70s, Eyler had developed a reputation in the Indianapolis gay community, especially among those who had a leather fetish. While many people thought that he was a nice, laid-back guy, Eyler's sexual partners noted his temper and his tendency to just lightly stab people in the chest during sex, which is weird. Like you just how weird would it be? You're doing it with somebody, you're doing it with your boo, and then they just kind of, I don't know, maybe they just start poking you. Maybe this starts with a poke with their fingernail right into your chest. Okay, that's weird. And then all of a sudden they just like start bringing out butter knives and then just increasingly sharper objects, but they're never like violently stabbing, just poking, just a little prick, just a little tick, 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 whore, tick, tick, whore, tick, tick, whore, tick, So stupid. On August 3rd, 1978, Eyler picked up 19-year-old Craig Long, who was hitchhiking in Terre Haute, where Eyler was living at the time. Terre Haute, on the border with Indiana and Illinois, quite like an hour and a half or so from Indianapolis. When Long was not interested in having a little sword fight with Eyler, he tried to then just get out of the car. Thanks for the ride, but I'm good here. In response, Eyler brandished a knife, drove Long out to a field, and tied him up. Long tried to break free and run away, but Eyler stabbed him in the chest, like for real this time. Long, though, successfully played dead, allowing Eyler to get back in his truck to leave. But as Eyler drove away, Long jumped up and stumbled to a nearby house where he was able to get police and medical attention. Eyler, for some reason, saw everything happen as he's driving away and then drove to the house that Long ran to and waited for police to show up. It was like, no, guys, it was an accident. I accidentally stabbed him. That's not what you think happened here. Police did not care about this and arrested him anyway. They also searched Eyler's vehicle and found multiple knives, a metal-tipped whip, handcuffs, tear gas, and a sword. Eyler was released on bail 20 days later and got his roommate to write a $2,500 check to Long in exchange for agreeing to not press charges. When Long accepted the check, Eyler was acquitted and only forced to pay $43 in court costs. 3 years later, Eyler formed a relationship with 20-year-old John Dobrovolskis, some Greek name, who was married to a woman at the time and had 2 children of his own, along with 3 other foster kids. However, John's wife was fully aware that he was gay and often turned the other cheek as Eyler moved into their home and helped pay rent while those two were having gay sex time together in the house with 5 of their kids. Eyler was allowed to tie John up, beat him, and yell at him before they did some very aggressive cuddling. Like, imagine being a kid in that house where some dude has just moved in and he's just tied your dad up. It's like, yeah, whore. How you like that? Yeah. You know what you gonna do, whore? You suck. Blah, you little... Anyway, I don't know. A year later, in October 1982, Eyler started killing people again, or he tried to. Like, he tried to kill Craig Long, but now he's really trying to kill people. It began when he abducted 19-year-old Stephen Crockett in Illinois and stabbed him 32 times. He killed 5 more people that year before abducting 16-year-old Irvin Gibson, who was found stabbed to death on top of a dog that had also been stabbed to death, which is sad and unnecessary. After another 7 murders, Indianapolis's gay community began to notice that several of their most prominent members had disappeared. Police, in between raiding the gay bars to get rid of said gay people, they began studying and filming people frequenting the city's gay bars to keep track of the suspects they had initially identified as the perpetrator of these murders. The city's gay newspaper, The Works, even offered a $1,500 reward for any information leading to the arrest and conviction of the killer. Indiana State Police then created a task force to hunt for the killer and reached out to the FBI for help. In response, the task force learned of 2 other similar murders in Kentucky and Chicago. On June 6, 1983, Thomas Henderson, one of Eyler's former lovers, contacted the task force and told him that he thought Larry Eyler was the person they were looking for. After learning that Eyler had in fact been arrested for the assault on Craig Long, the task force decided to keep their eye on him but not really place him under full surveillance. After 5 more bodies were discovered, Eyler was pulled over in Lowell, Indiana on a minor traffic violation. Because Eyler had a hitchhiker in his car at the time of the stop, he was detained on suspicion of soliciting a prostitute. Investigators quickly learned that Eyler was a suspect in all of the gay murders and asked him a series of questions about them. Eyler happily cooperated on most questions, but refused to talk about his sexuality. He also agreed to take a polygraph test and get his mugshot and fingerprints taken, which, what are you doing? He also allowed police to search his truck, which revealed rope, handcuffs, a hammer, 2 baseball bats, a mallet, and surgical tape. Oh, God. Even more, the knife handle had blood on it, and investigators found a pair of boots that matched a plaster casting that was taken near one of the bodies. Like, he's got to be done for, right? I don't remember how the story ends, so we're going to find out together. Police then searched Eyler's home and found credit card receipts indicating that Eyler had been in various locations at the same time various victims had been killed. They then obtained phone records and other evidence that directly replaced Eyler at the location of several more murders. One member of that task force, Kathy Berner, remarked that if Eyler wasn't the killer they were looking for, then he was literally just following the real killer on a daily basis. And yet, despite all of that evidence against him, Eyler was released from custody on October 4th. He then immediately went out and hired Chicago lawyer Kenneth Ditkowski, who filed a $250,000 lawsuit against 11 different police officers for a violation of Eyler's 14th Amendment rights. This civil trial began on October 29th, with Ditkowski claiming there was, quote, not a scintilla of evidence against Eyler, clearly ignoring this gigantic mountain of clear evidence that I just laid out for you against Eyler. As the trial convened for the day, Eyler was then stopped by 2 Lake County investigators with warrants to obtain hair and blood samples for a murder that had occurred in Illinois. A few hours later, he was formally charged with the murder of 28-year-old Ralph Calise, who had been stabbed 17 times with a knife, so much so that parts of his intestines had begun to fall out of his abdomen. However, Eyler's new attorney for this charge, David Shippers, asserted that Eyler's detainment back in Lowell, Indiana had been illegal. Judge William Block agreed with this assessment, along with the fact that the search warrant for Eyler's home had been technically unwarranted and other evidence had been tainted. Despite all of the other evidence clearly showing that Larry Eyler had killed all of these people, along with 7 more bodies that had been found since Eyler was initially detained, Judge Block was forced to order Eyler's release on February 6, 1984. Well, guess what? Not surprisingly, this episode's already going to be like an hour long. Good thing I deleted that bit at the beginning. Jesus. Not surprisingly, Eyler killed 16-year-old Daniel Bridges on August 19th, 1984. Although Bridges was straight, Bridges had been a male prostitute since he was 12. So, I mean, are you really that straight? Eyler tied him to a chair with a clothesline and tortured Bridges to death. He then dismembered the body in the bathroom and drained the blood. The janitor at Eyler's apartment complex where he did all of this, Joseph Bala, found the bags and, thinking they had been illegally dumped in the wrong dumpster, opened them up to try to figure out what it was and put them in the right dumpster. He probably immediately regretted that and has probably never opened another trash bag in his life. Bala immediately went to the police and told them he'd seen Eyler dumping these bags the day before. Eyler was then arrested a few minutes later, and investigators soon found evidence of Bridges' blood splattered all over the apartment, despite Eyler's best efforts to clean it up. Also, despite finding Bridges' bloodstained clothes in Eyler's apartment, Eyler had the audacity to deny any involvement in the murder. Like, how? And look, I don't blame him. He's probably super confident that he can get away with anything at this point. But police are literally standing in his bar. Mr. Eyler, we see that there's still blood stains everywhere. They're just smeared now. Like you took a damp paper towel and tried to wipe everything off. And then we also see various articles of clothing that we know belonged to Daniel Bridges. They're covered in his blood. We saw your janitor told us he saw you dumping the bag that contained his body out there. Like, you just go ahead and confess. No, I didn't do it. Wasn't me. I don't know what you guys are talking about. The killer just broke into my apartment and murdered him here. Like, I just came home and I saw this mess. I'm like, oh my goodness, I've got to clean this up. And so that's all that was happening, dude. I don't know what to tell you. Well, at the trial for this murder, his lawyer, David Shippers, attempted to defend Eyler by saying that even though Eyler's fingerprints were clearly on the garbage bags where the body had been stuffed, there weren't any eyewitnesses who could verify that Eyler actually murdered him. Your Honor, I know that the janitor, this janitor, we're going to believe a janitor, the lowest of the lowest paying jobs. He's probably stupid, Your Honor. He saw Eyler throwing a bag out that had his body in it. All right. And yeah, Eyler was in his apartment with Bridges' bloodstained clothes, but did anybody actually see him murder this kid? No, you must acquit. So, unfortunately for Eyler, several people, including his roommate and his lover, testified against him, making it really obvious that he had killed Bridges. And after 3 hours of deliberation, Eyler was finally found guilty. On October 3rd, despite David Shippers, this lawyer, man, despite his attempts to defend Eyler as a kind, decent person, Eyler was sentenced to death by lethal injection. While other morally short-sighted attorneys were appointed to appeal the conviction, Eyler pleaded guilty to the murder of Stephen Agan, someone I hadn't even mentioned yet, in exchange for a life sentence. Eyler eventually died in prison from AIDS on March 6, 1994. 2 days after Eyler's death, his new attorney, Kathleen Zellner, released a 17-page confession that Eyler had written back prior to his guilty plea for the murder of Stephen Agan. The confession highlighted 21 victims between 1982 and 1984, but laid most of the blame on Robert Little, his longtime roommate and quasi-gay lover, who testified against him at Bridges' trial. Little was actually arrested because of this confession and put on trial for Stephen Agan's murder, but he was ultimately acquitted.
All done.
All right, a super long serial killer sampler. Listen, we don't need to go through what we learned. We learned too much today. All right, I don't want to rehash any of it. Some makes me look bad, and we're going to just move on. So next week on the show, we're going back to Texas. We did some tales from Texas on episode 121. Most of them, I think, were like paranormal related. These are going to be actual people doing actual things in Texas. We're going to look at the stories of Marshall Ratliff, Kenneth McDuff, George Pickering, Anna Yates, and Stephen Russell. That's who it is. So another big episode next week, but that will do it for today. Thank you so much for continuing to listen. Keep telling all your friends and keep it weird.
This is a podcast